How to learn language without studying. Here we go. So the very first thing we need to understand here is what exactly we mean by studying and how we compare that to other types of language learning, like immersion or like natural learning like kids do when they are preschool age. And so when we look at studying, we typically think of like grammar workbooks, writing, reading, anything that is direct focus and effort and explicitly learning the language. And then when we think of without studying, we typically think of like little kids learning, and they seem to pick things up naturally through immersion. Well, when we look at studying from that perspective and we look at natural language learning, we have that other side. What we need to see now is what comes in the middle of those two, which is practice. So not necessarily explicit studying, like explicit practice in writing and reading and speaking with corrections and all of that, and not necessarily just automatic learning through immersion like kids do, because if we only did that, if we only did what kids do before they go to school, they would only know what they know before they go to school, and then a little bit more. We wouldn't have the refined language skills that we do from going to school, right? We go to school we have about 5 years before we go to school, and that is our like natural language learning time, and then we go to school, and then we have an integration of all of these practices of learning how to read and write and doing grammar practice, speaking practice, listening practice too, with what we've already learned through natural acquisition. And so in the middle, we have a balance of these two. We have somewhat like what you'd see in the early grades, in early grade schools, like in kindergarten and in first grade, we have the time for exploration and practice of the language, and that is usually seen by activities that are focused but not so disciplined, not so rigid that they feel like they're mundane drills going through them. It's a balance between the two. Like, for example, you might have one activity that is really focused for the little kids when they're in school, that is like a page that they're working on writing, and they have some cutting and gluing and stuff like that too, some tracing, and then after that they might get up and move around and do like an art activity or do something else, which is also practicing language because they are reading in that language. If they're like identifying colors, reading the paint bottles, or they are speaking, like, can you hand me the paintbrush, where's the water, where's the paper, that's all language practice. So it's there even though it doesn't appear to be, and that is a structured practice even though it is somewhat free flow within that structure. Okay, so this is what we seek as language learners, as adult language learners, is that balance in between those two, because studying doesn't have to be unpleasant. It doesn't have to be like, oh man, I gotta sit down to study. It can, like, sometimes we do need to have that structure, that discipline, but if we do that the entire time, it's just gonna burn us out, and ultimately it's not going to work. So not only is it unpleasant, but it's not going to work either. So without studying so much, more of a practice, essentially what we're doing in this video is we're redefining the term studying. And we're redefining it to mean a balanced practice of structure, of exercises, of grammar, vocabulary, and integrating that with free flow practice, which is essentially fluency practice, so that we work our way toward fluency through this balanced approach. And how we do that is by creating an environment in which we can learn. So how you create this environment is ultimately up to you. Some ways that you can do it, and that I've done, that work for me and for my students, are, for example, by creating a designated study time, like within that hour or two block, then you have that study time and you can allow yourself to flow through maybe one really focused activity like a grammar exercises, or you can have that time to do listening, like listening to an audiobook, or if you're at an even lower level, something like Duolingo for practice there. And then moving through that, even beyond just having a study session, what you can do is really, ultimately, the thing is keeping the language top of mind. And that is so important because it shifts us from being language studiers to language learners, to speakers of that language. When we think of, okay, I am learning Spanish, right? I am a Spanish speaker. I am always thinking about that, and then when I have time and throughout the day, I am looking for time. So not only like when I have time, I'm looking for time when I can practice that. Or I am a Chinese speaker, I'm a Chinese learner, I'm not quite a Chinese speaker yet, I'm a Chinese learner, I'm on my way to become a Chinese speaker. Throughout the day, as I find time, I have my Duolingo app, I don't pull it up, practice. And always keeping that top of mind, keeping that like I am becoming this person, that is also this practice of language practice and language studying, shifting into practice, is that mindset, and then that keeping it there as a value, essentially. What you value, what you keep important to you, what is important to you, is what you're going to make time for. And so this is that other perspective of studying, in that we are finding ways, any way, and when we find a way that doesn't work, when we feel like, oh, I don't want to study, look at that, because that means that there's a problem there. That means that you need to adjust the way you approach studying. That means you need to find a way to make it more enjoyable for yourself. That might be changing the activity, like I mentioned earlier. It might be changing the location. It might be changing where you study. It might be going outside. It might be going to a cafe or something, like making it a very pleasant experience for you. And that will shift how you feel about studying. And so we have, let's look at what we've discussed here. So we have the act of studying. It is what you make it to be. What your study sessions are, that is what studying is. So you are defining studying with what you do to practice your language. And then we have that act of studying as you define it, and then we have the location where you study, which is also so important. The location and the environment there, because that is going to influence you as you are learning that language. And it doesn't necessarily have to be like, we're not talking about necessarily going abroad, going to live in that country, although you can. These are things that you can do at home or in your town at least. You can, by changing the location, like we discussed, different places in your house even, if you can't leave your house. Go upstairs, go downstairs, go to a different room, go study on your bed, study on the floor, study in a chair. Sometimes that really helps. And I know when I feel sometimes like, I'm like, oh, okay, I'm kind of done, just changing the location will help. Or just getting up and walking around a little bit and then coming back, it helps. Because it's like a reset, and it also just gives you another perspective, and it makes it feel less mundane sometimes when you're doing something you absolutely have to do. Okay, so we have our studying practice, where we study, how we study, and then our overall perspective and mindset around studying is crucial above all else, because even if you are making yourself study, you're making like, I'm gonna sit down, I'm gonna do all this, if you're not receptive to the information, you're wasting your time. If you're not putting yourself in the space of, I am capable, I am going to learn, I'm going to find a way to learn, and I'm going to enjoy it because it's what I want to do, because I love it and I want to reach my goals, that is going to move you forward. And that is going to move you forward with less effort. So less effort, meaning that when you're sitting down in a session or standing or lying down, whatever you're doing, and you're thinking, oh, I have to do this, I have to do this, that takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of your mental energy to force yourself to do it. Whereas if you shift the way that you think about it, you're going into it with all of this energy already, and all your energy just flows into your practice. So rather than having to force yourself, like, oh, I have to push myself, and oh, I have to do this, and oh, I have to do this, instead it'll flow through, and it'll be so much smoother, so much more productive, less energy, and you will learn more. Alright, so that is it for how to learn without studying. Essentially, we are changing our perspective of what studying is and making it an enjoyable experience so that we learn more productively, more quickly, more efficiently, and we make our way toward fluency. Right, I'll see you guys back here next time, next Tuesday at 7 a.m. Pacific Standard Time with another video, and make sure to check out that blog post posted in the description down below. Bye guys!